Today I decided to give you guys a review of the first Star Wars film, chronologically that is, and that's Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Released in 1999, this was the first of three prequel films released by George Lucas that basically tells the backstory to characters and events from the original trilogy. This film was very divisive upon its initial release, and I have my own set of feelings about the film. Some things I really like, some things I hate. So without further ado, let's get started. The film essentially stars two Jedi Knights, Obi-Wan Kenobi, who was in the original films as well, and a new character, Qui-Gon Jinn, who is Obi-Wan Kenobi's master. The main plot of the film basically focuses around this evil trade federation who uses their resources and droid army to try to get the Queen of Naboo to sign a illegal treaty which will allow them to tax all of the goods coming in and out of the planet. Our heroes must rescue the Queen and her people from the evil Trade Federation and try to take back the planet with the help of characters along the way. Along the way they meet Jar Jar Binks, who is supposed to be the comic relief for the movie, but he's really just kind of an annoying asshole. Our heroes attempt to escape the planet with the Queen and Jar Jar in an attempt to go get help from the Republic, but unfortunately their ship is hit by the Trade Federation, but thanks to the efforts of R2-D2, they're able to limp along to the planet of Tatooine. On the planet they meet a boy named Anakin Skywalker, who they sense is strong in the Force, and decide to bring the kid back with them to Coruscant. But before they leave the planet they must earn Anakin's freedom because he is a slave, and thus he competes in a dangerous pod race, upon which he wins, and thus is allowed to leave with a Jedi, but unfortunately he has to leave his mother behind. Anakin says his final goodbyes to his mother, and then they're off to the planet of Coruscant to inform the public of the Trade Federation's crimes. Fortunately, when they take their evidence to the courts, they're more or less rejected and told that they're lying, and thus the Queen must rely on the Jedi to help her save her planet. Before returning to Naboo, Anakin faces the trials of the Jedi to see if he is ready to become or capable of becoming a Jedi. Unfortunately, Yoda and the rest of the Jedi Council don't think that Anakin should become a Jedi because they sense darkness in his future. Due to this, Qui-Gon decides to take on Anakin as his own Padawan and train him whether the Council agrees with it or not. After this, Qui-Gon, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Padme return to Naboo to help her free her planet. People of Naboo join up with the Gungans, giving them an army so that they can fight the droid army from the Trade Federation, giving them a chance to save their planet from the tyranny. An all-out battle ensues between the people on Naboo, the Queen, the Jedi, the droid army. You can see a massive space battle with Naboo's starships versus droid starships. This all culminates in a battle with Darth Maul, the Sith apprentice. He's an extremely skilled warrior and the only villain to date in the movies that has a dual-bladed lightsaber. We'll take everything that our heroes have to defeat this villain in 2-on-1 lightsaber combat. This duel is one for the ages, and one of the coolest lightsaber battles in all of the Star Wars saga. Ultimately, our heroes are victorious, and the bisected Maul is last seen falling down a shaft to his supposed death. The battle is won. Unfortunately, Qui-Gon passes on, but not before relinquishing his wishes to Obi-Wan that he trains Anakin to become a Jedi Knight, which Obi-Wan agrees to. Thankfully, Obi-Wan is able to convince Yoda and the rest of the Jedi Council to allow him to train Anakin Skywalker. The film ends with Anakin being accepted into the Jedi Council, and Naboo is free from the Trade Federation, and a celebration commences. That's the basic plot of The Phantom Menace. Overall, how I feel about the film, it comes down to this. I feel that the visual effects, for the most part, actually hold up pretty well. I think actually more so than Episode 2 and 3. I think that Lucas actually combines CGI and practical effects relatively well here, and I think that it works pretty good for this film. That's not to say I love all the effects. There are a few janky ones, especially the Gungan city I think looks a little dated. And some of the CGI in certain spots is a little wonky, but for the most part, I do think it's a good-looking film. What I also enjoy about the film is the lightsaber combat. The fight with Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan is actually rather entertaining and one that I really enjoy. I think Jake Lloyd, despite the fact that he got a lot of hate, plays a pretty good young Anakin. He's believable as a young kid who is training to be a Jedi. I think that Natalie Portman and Keira Knightley did a good job as the Queen and the fake Queen. And overall, I think most people are trying their best with the performances. My big negatives of this film come in the overall direction. I think everyone here is kind of stiff, kind of wooden. The dialogue's delivered in a very boring manner, and I don't blame the actors. I do blame Lucas. I think this story of this film, of Phantom Menace, is actually rather good, but I think the script is really lacking and subpar. The pacing is also kind of all over the place. The Coruscant scenes are rather boring, and it's mostly a lot of talking, but it's not very interesting talking. It's just kind of plain, stiff dialogue. I think that with a few rewrites, this could have been a well-polished and great movie. But as it stands, I think it is lacking. Does it have good visuals? You betcha. Good action? Oh, you know it. But it has a really slow second act, some really wonky performances throughout, a really annoying character in Jar Jar Binks. I don't care what people say, that is an annoying character. And overall, it's just a film that doesn't quite live up to its potential. Another problem that I have with the film is that there's no clear protagonist. You could argue that maybe it's Qui-Gon Jinn because he kind of drives the story forward, but on the same token, you could argue maybe it's Anakin since he's ultimately what this origin story is about. But the central premise and plot focuses around Queen Amidala. So is she the main character? It's hard to know. It's one of the few movies where I can't quite tell you who the main character is. Online, it seems people's general consensus is that it's Qui-Gon. But for me, he's not really the focal point. He's just kind of in the movie. So it's kind of hard to tell. It's just one of those films that doesn't have a lot of focus, which is another problem that I have with the film. Overall, I'm going to give Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, a 5 out of 10. A good attempt by Lucas, but it really needed, I think, a different director, because I don't think Lucas is that good of a director, and maybe a screenwriter to polish up the dialogue. But not a terrible film, and one that I don't hate, and definitely has a lot more heart than some of the newer Star Wars films. But I'd like to hear your opinion on it below. Let me know if you love this movie or hate this movie, or if you're like me. Overall, I do like aspects of this film. I think it's very nostalgic, and I'll always have a special place in my heart. Before I go, I figure I'd mention a few of these Star Wars Episode 1 video games. While I'm kind of mixed on the film, I actually rather love the games associated with the film, and I think the video games is the best thing about the movie. First up, we have Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace on PlayStation. This is actually one of my favorite PlayStation games ever, and if you've seen my top 10 PS1 list, you've seen that this game actually made that list. A really fun pseudo-RPG action-adventure game where you get to play as Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, Queen Amidala, and Captain Panaka. A great game through and through with really fun levels. The Tatooine level is awesome. It's like one big RPG in the entire level. Everything about this game is great. And if you have yourself a PS1 or PS3, or even a Dreamcast, because this game was available on that as well, check this game out. It's really fun. Next, we have Star Wars Obi-Wan. Essentially, another Episode 1 game where you play as just Obi-Wan this time around. You basically play through the events of the Episode 1 movie as Obi-Wan in really cool lightsaber combat that lets you use the right joystick as the lightsaber controls. A really fun game, but unfortunately it's not backwards compatible, and it was only released on Xbox. So if you do want this game, you have to get yourself a working Xbox, good luck, or a modded one. If you can't find this game and have a working console, check it out. There's also Star Wars Episode 1 Racer on the N64. This game is also released on Dreamcast and has actually been re-released on Switch in more recent years. A very fun racing game that is high octane, high speed, intense action, and one that I very much recommend. It's actually one of my most favorite racing games of all time, and of all the scenes in the movie to make a specific game out of, the racing segment does make sense. Lastly, there's Star Wars Episode 1 Battle for Naboo. This was made by the same team that made the Rogue Squadron games, and essentially it's another Rogue Squadron game. I used to call this game Rogue Squadron 1.5, because it came out after Rogue Squadron 1, but before 2, and basically has the same controls. Basically, you play as people on the planet of Naboo, and you have to fight off the droid army using the vehicles available on the planet. It's really fun. The combat's great. It loosely follows the story of the movie, and it's one that I highly recommend if you love the Rogue Squadron series or space combat. Well, that's my review. I thank you all for watching. I know it's a little bit long-winded, But I do have a lot to say about this film, and even though I don't love it, I do see why some people do, and I think that this film will always have a special place in my heart, if not just for nostalgia's sake. I thank you all for watching, and peace out.